we are now ready to go to those different types of imports. Let me go back to here. Let's start with a single mailbox type of import. So this comes down to, again, knowing the data that you have in here. And I know that I've got this folder, EDRM emails, that has 14 files and is over 3.0, it's 3.02 gigabytes. That should be a little alarm to me to know, okay, these are, there's probably no way that this is just 14 like PDFs, that it'd be 3 gigabytes worth of data. Because I remember back in the day when I had my first iPod mini that I purchased, it was teal, and it could hold 4 gigabytes worth of data. And I was like, oh my God, that's thousands of songs. How am I ever going to fill that up? Whereas now I have an iPhone with 64 gigabytes of data and I'm constantly having to delete stuff. Just shows how much more data we have in the world today. But you can go ahead and click in here and you'll see, yep, okay, these are PSTs. These are zipped files collected in boxes, which again will contain maybe hundreds, when unzipped, thousands of documents, tens of thousands of documents, all within that single document, all within that single file. So the thing about this is you're going to want to import these individually so that you can, A, make sure that you're reducing your risk of the import failing because of size, but B, also you're going to want to be able to assign the custodian, which is something that you can search upon after the fact. And so it's going to help you keep organized as well. So what I'm going to do is click on Albert Myers PST and click import selected. And it skips step 1 where I have to select what type of import this is. It's going to say, okay, this is a single mailbox type of import. This next step is going to be, it shows you where this information is coming from. This is coming from case. Here is the database ID, which you can find at any point in time up here in the URL. This is a unique identifier for the database that you are working in. So if you're ever having any issues and you need to reach out to the support team, this is where you can say, okay, this is the database ID. This is where I'm having the issues, and send it to them so that you guys will be on the same page much more quickly. That's saying within this database, from the file room, the parent folder is EDRM emails. And then the file path under there, this is what we're actually importing, is Albert Myers PST. And so I'm going to go ahead and name my batch, because if I duplicate the screen and go to data and then imports, we can see that we've already had 280 batches in this training database. And the thing here is that I'm not going to know. So this next one is going to be automatically named batch 281, but 30 imports down the line, I'm not going to know what batch 281 was. And so I'm just going to go ahead and give it a name based on what I am importing. And so I'm just going to say it's going to be batch 281 Albert Myers PST. So it's automatically going to name it batch 281. So if I were to type batch 281 here, it would say batch 281 Albert Myers PST. The next thing I'm going to do is assign it a custodian. Again, the custodian is generally where this information was collected from, who this information was collected from. And so in this case, I'm going to say that it's pretty safe to assume that this was collected from Albert Myers. And so I'm going to go ahead, I can either create Albert Myers by, if it's a new database, I'm going to have to create my custodians. Click on that plus sign next to the figure and then hit type in their name and hit submit, and that will save them. But I've already done this before. And so I'm going to go ahead and just select from my existing custodians, Albert Myers. And then I always recommend having a base level of organization when you import by creating a folder. Again, I'm going to go over here and then go to the review tab and show you, here are the 85 folders that we've got for this database. But any documents that have not been foldered, you can find here under the unfoldered documents. But this is kind of just like a hodgepodge of documents that I don't know where they came from, especially if you do multiple imports and you don't folder any of them. It's going to be more difficult for you to get organized. You certainly can take some steps retroactively to fix it, but I like to be organizing myself from the start. And so I'm going to go ahead and, as a best practice, each time create a folder at least for that import or multiple imports going into a single folder. So I'm going to go ahead and create a folder here and title it Albert Myers, what's today, the 27th? 1/27/22, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit create. So I've created that folder. And then the last thing here is going to be these deduplication and DNIS detection settings. So these are going to be toggled on or off depending on the type of import that you're conducting. So let's say, so right now you can see that deduplication is toggled off or toggled on, and DNIS detection is toggled off. What deduplication is essentially taking those documents and looking at their MD5 hash, or like their thumbprint essentially, to identify, is this a unique document in this database? If it is, it will import it. If it's not, it's already been imported, it will remove it so that you don't have multiple copies of it, which you can imagine if you were like doing a case where you were importing from 5 individuals from the same company. There's probably multiple times that company-wide memos were received by all of those individuals, and you wouldn't want to have to review that document 5 times to say, okay, this isn't a relevant document. Again, this isn't a relevant document. Again, please stop showing me this is not a relevant document. And so it's going to remove that so that you only have 1 copy of that. And so that's a very helpful feature. But these are toggled on or off based on the type of import. So single mailbox, on, off, loose files or multiple files, on. And for productions with load files, it's going to be off, off. And the reason that you would have it off for that would probably be because all of those documents that are being produced to you are in all likelihood considered to be responsive documents that even if you have, you should have, you're not going to want to change it. And in all likelihood, they probably wouldn't be deduplicated anyways because they had been altered. Their MD5 would be altered based on having a bait stamp assigned to that document. Any changes that you make to a document, even as small as adding a period to a document, is going to give it a different fingerprint. So I'm going to go ahead and hit import. And that is that. It takes us to our imports tab and gives us a little overview of our import, which let me show you where we actually are right now. If I click imports again, we are within this. If you click on the batch name, again, batch 281, it takes you to see a batch summary of what's going on. It's saying that we are batch 281, Albert Myers 0001 PST. Here it's status, it's in the queued status. It's going to work its way through it. Imported by me on this date and time. Here's the folder. All of that stuff that we went through is here. One of the things I want to point out though, is if you ever did need to find information about what that batch was, you could click into that batch and you can see where it came from within the file room. So we can see, okay, this is where I can trace it back to. This is where that information came from if you ever needed to know what that batch was. And you can always go back and edit the name of that batch if you ever needed to by clicking on this pencil and typing it in. So now that this import has started and it's starting its processing, it's working its way through those documents. If I were to hit import again, we can see that it's starting even more documents. This is all happening virtually on the servers. I can close my browser. I can go grab some lunch, come back. This is happening as I'm going. It'll let me know, it'll send me an email notification when my import has started processing, and it will let me know as well when it has finished processing and we're good to go. But at this point, I can either leave or I could go back to my file room, go back to my EDRM emails, and then kick off the next person, and then repeat those steps for each one of these custodians that I've collected from. Again, kicking these off individually is going to help mitigate any errors that you run into. It's going to help with organizing the documents and organizing them, assigning them to a custodian, and it's going to make it a much smoother process. Whereas if I were to, instead of importing from individually, I were to import all of these at once from the parent, from the folder level, it's going to say, instead of saying, oh, this is a single mailbox, it's going to say this is a multiple files type of import, because it notices there's multiple files in there instead of just one PST zipped file or Mbox file. And so that's something to keep an eye on, is just knowing what type of data you're importing to make sure that you're avoiding those errors.